Hey guys, welcome back once again to Reignited. We are back in the shop working, and this time we have something really fun. Now you saw the title, we are installing this set of exhaust cutouts on here. I'm looking forward to this because I've never done it before and I've always wanted to, and the vehicle we're installing these on is the Budget Challenger. Now if you haven't seen anything on the Budget Challenger before, I'll go ahead and put a link right here to the whole build series. You can check that out. But I wanted you guys to know that I did in fact sell the Budget Challenger, and I sold it to a good friend of mine. Now he's driven it for a little while and he decided that he wanted a little bit more rumble in this thing. So he came up with this kit with the exhaust cutouts, which I thought was a great idea because it allows you to still have that rumble, that really strong noise when you want to, but then you can just hit a switch, go right back to that low tone when you don't. So great option. Again, really looking forward to installing this, and I hope you guys follow along. So these exhaust cutouts are from a company called DPW. Now I don't know anything about them. This is not a sponsored video at all. It was just a kit that my customer found that I thought looked like a nice option. So let's go ahead and pop this thing open and take a look and see what we see inside. All right, so many companies nowadays, they spend so much money on marketing as far as like making it look nice when you open it up. So it comes with this little bag in here, and then underneath you've got the wiring and some zip ties to hold the wiring in place. So it actually seems like a fairly compact kit, which is very nice. Of course, this is just one side. All right, so interesting. So it already has a pre-fish mouth set up on here so that you can actually put it up to the pipe. Now this is designed for 2.5-inch tubing. You can get them in several different sizes. But what makes this kit a little bit more unique than some of the others is you basically have these two clamps here to where this pipe and this pipe can both rotate in any direction. So you can actually place the actuator in any direction, and you can place the cutout in any direction. So it makes it really versatile, and that's why I thought made it a good kit. So once we actually go to install this thing, we'll see if that actually holds true in real life when you're trying to install it. But I think it will. I think it's gonna be a really nice setup. But as far as I can tell, this is actually really, really clean. So that's nice. What I'm not seeing in here is I'm not seeing any sort of instruction kit. It may be like a lot of products these days, they have their instructions all online so that you have to watch a video online for the install. Because I'm kind of wondering myself about the hookups here for how we're going to get power to this thing. Let's take a look at the other one. Oh, here we go. The instruction manual was in the other box, so that's good. This one also comes with the little switch here. And okay, so we have, looks like it just runs the power and ground direct to the battery, and then it just hooks into the other harness connection. So that looks like all we're doing here is running a direct power and ground to the battery as far as the wiring goes. So little inline fuse here. That's simpler than I was expecting. I thought we were gonna have to tap in to the vehicle harness somewhere. That's actually kind of nice if we don't have to tap in. I'd prefer not to if I don't. So this seems like it's gonna work pretty well. So this is pretty nice. I do actually like the quality of what I'm seeing here so far. You've got the polished stainless. Now, the pipe that I'm welding to, the factory mid pipes here on the Challenger, are not stainless themselves. However, I will be welding stainless to them. So I'll be using stainless rod and I'll be TIG welding these things in place. Maybe a bit more technical than some people, but that's what I want to do because I want to make for a really nice, clean looking install. There it is. We have our whole kit unboxed here. We have both the cutouts, we have some zip ties, we have all the wiring, we have the instructions, and we have the little remote control to control them. Now, apparently you can also control these things through a phone app. So I'm gonna have to look up and see what's going on with that. But let's get forward with the install process. First thing I'm going to do is I'm gonna go ahead and raise the Challenger up in the air. I wanna take a look at where exactly I want to place these things. Let's do it. There we go. So this is like the original design of what these cutouts were intended for, is to go back here on the back. Now what that means is originally back here there were some resonators and you had your mufflers up here. So if you dumped it here, it would be very much more throatier. However, because this car already has an aftermarket exhaust, these resonators back here have already been cut out. So putting the cutouts here would do absolutely nothing for the car. It'd make them sound identical to where it already does because it has a set of mufflers here and then it's just straight piped from here on back. Therefore, these cutouts are gonna have to go forward on the exhaust. Now, ideally it is best on cutouts if you can have them in the path of the exhaust, very much so like a wastegate would be on a turbo manifold. You want it to be as in line with the exhaust as possible. However, that is not always possible when you're doing stuff like this. Let me show you where we're going to put these things. So with this exhaust, it goes from here back to such a tight formation back to the mufflers. The only place where we can put these cutouts is right here in the mid pipes, and it won't exactly be in line with the exhaust flow. However, let me tell you, if you introduce a gigantic open hole in the exhaust is going to come out of there. So it should be okay. Basically, we're going to install these things a bit like this, basically facing each other in the center. The turn down will be right here. I think we'll run them back just a little ways. That might actually work out pretty well. We'll also swivel the motor to where it's up on top here so that it's out of the way and not in any danger of being hit by anything. So if we have these things side by side here, hopefully they'll fit. I think they will. And we'll get them installed, and you'll have your dump right here in the center of the vehicle. I think that's going to be pretty cool and sound pretty good. And also, it's already pre-notched on the kit itself. It's already a pre-fish mouth right here for the tubing. So we'll go ahead and install that, weld that up. Shouldn't be a big deal to get this thing installed. So once you've got a good base location for where you want to stick your cutout, in this case I'm going to go right here. I'll probably adjust the angle of the motor itself here, but one thing to keep in mind is that you want to have a good amount of clearance all the way around, especially for your motor actuator assembly itself. You don't want to put it too close to the body, otherwise it could hit. So give yourself at least a 1/4 inch of clearance all the way around the motor assembly. But once you actually have it identified, like where exactly you want to put this thing, go ahead and make a mark with a Sharpie here, and then cut that out any way that you are able to. If you have a plasma cutter, that's definitely the best option because it's going to be an irregular shape. In my case, I'll probably use a hole saw here, and then a cutoff wheel, and then a carbide to really start to cut it all the way out. Now, you don't want to cut it all the way out to where you made your mark with your marker, because it'll be too big at that point, because remember, you went around the outside edge of the tube. So cut it on the inside of that mark you've made, and then keep cleaning it up with a carbide bit there until it gets close, because at a certain point you're going to take this piece off from the motor assembly itself and weld it directly here. So when you place it on there, you'll be able to look down inside there and see how much you need to take out to make it work. Now, if you're familiar with the Budget Challenger series, you'll know that these mid pipes have already been modified because I installed SRT headers on this vehicle. So I had to cut these things down and reshape them. So these are already different than what you're going to see in your standard 5.7 Challenger, Charger, or 300, anything like that. However, the process remains the same. We're going to go ahead and yank these guys out, cut that hole out for the cutouts, continue on. There we go. There we go. Now you can see basically the marking that I have for the cutout. Now I wasn't able to get the marker around the top edge here because it was just in a tight angle, but basically by this point you can kind of just infer that, yeah, it's going to go right about there. So you can finish your marking there if you want, but I'm going to go ahead and get this thing cut out. We'll get it all cleaned up, hit it with a flat disc, get it nice and clean for welding. We'll weld that guy on there. All right, so we've got our basic outline here. As you saw, I basically just took a little hole saw, cut a couple of holes out of it, and then I ended up just finishing off with a cutoff wheel to get to the rough edge, and then I ended up using a flap disc to really get it close to the edge there. So I think we're pretty good right now. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and take a file, clean up this inside edge here so that it's all nice and smooth, and then we'll test fit our end on here. We've got our hole cut. Let's go ahead and test fit our piece here, which actually looks really good all the way around. It's really nice with that pre-fish mouth edge on there. I don't have to do any coping. It basically fits perfectly, so that's not bad. I'm gonna go ahead and tack this guy in place, and then we'll go ahead and weld it all the way around. All right, I went ahead and tacked it in several locations around the edge to help keep it from pulling one way or the other as I start welding it. So now that I've got it tacked securely, I'm gonna go ahead and start doing little patches of weld all the way around. I'm gonna do a line here, line here, line here. That way it still pulls evenly all the way around. If I try to just start at one side and just go all the way around, the whole thing's just gonna pull upward, and I don't want that. I want this thing to stay as still as possible. So anyway, let's get into it. Well, I'm not going to win a welding award on this one, but it is definitely on there. And I like the way it turned out. You can actually see, well, maybe you can't, but down in there, it's pretty well, I mean, that hole's wide open, so that exhaust is definitely going to come out of there. You can see I welded it all up in there. It's all TIG welded with some stainless rod. I think we're in really good shape right now. So let's go ahead and reinstall this mid pipe, get the actual cutout on there and in place, and that'll kind of determine where our second one goes. So let's get that done. So we've got our flap here bolted back into place. I went ahead and basically set this one in the area where I think it should be. Now the only issue is that this isn't exactly symmetrical side to side between these pipes, so there's no way to get this perfectly even side to side. And we're gonna have to change the orientation of the actual flapper valve itself because it also is not symmetrical up in here. So I was trying to figure out what would be the best solution overall. And I think somewhere right about here, and you have both of your valves dumping in the same area. Basically, they're gonna kind of dump, well, I mean, it's gonna be right in the same general area. So it's one of those things where you're not gonna notice anyway, because it's directly under the center of the vehicle, you'll never see it, but I think that's about as even as I'm gonna be able to get it. So I went ahead and made my marks here on the tube. So now I think it's time to get this mid pipe out. We'll get our cut made and get this side welded in as well. And then as soon as we get everything back together again, that's when we can start running our wiring for this. There we go. All right, we got this second one all welded on here. Same thing, welds are just fine. They're not, I don't know, I don't think they're absolutely amazing, but honestly, they're still really, really clean. I think you're never gonna see this thing anyway, but you know, I try to do a nice job wherever I am, trying to weld these things on. I think they came out pretty good, pretty unobtrusive, and honestly, it's way less than it would be if you tried to MIG weld this thing on here, which I didn't want to do because it is stainless, so I wanted to use stainless rod. Anyway, regardless, that's all done. This one's ready to go back in the car. Let's go ahead and slap her back in there. So I keep talking about my welds aren't the greatest welds. These are the instructions, and look at the welds on the instructions. That is terrible. All right, I dare say my welds are better than those welds. These clamps are essentially like little mini V-band clamps. They are a little finicky to get on there, I will say. I'm trying to get to where the clamps themselves are not fully at the bottom. You don't want them hanging down to where they can get hit on stuff, so you want to move them up as much as you can. Something like that. Now the only negative here is that this section here is just a touch lower than the cross member for the transmission here. However, I'm not seeing any sort of marks here on the exhaust, so it doesn't look like anything's ever been drug right there. So hopefully I'll just make the customer aware of it, that this is here, and we'll try to keep that as much out of the way as we can. There we go. You can kind of see there. All right, we've got both our cutouts in place. You can kind of see how they point towards the back of the vehicle. I've got them centered as best as I can. They're not 100% even with each other, but they are close. I still like the overall look of it. I think it works out pretty well, and it's pretty incognito. You go up level with the car, you got a little bit sticking down, but not bad at all. That's about as good as we're gonna get on this thing. So I don't think he's gonna have any issues with it dragging here, but I think it looks pretty cool too. So the hard part is done. We've got those cutouts installed. Now we're gonna work on the wiring itself, and it seems like the wiring is extraordinarily straightforward. Very, very simple idea here. Essentially, you've got this harness here, the smaller harness that connects to both cutouts, which then goes to a single plug, basically joins them all together so that they operate off the same switch. And then you have your one connection here, which then goes all the way up to the battery here, and you've got your fused ignition or your ground here. Now, on this car, I'm trying to decide which way I actually want to run the wiring, because first of all, we installed our cutouts way further upstream than they were designed for. They're designed to be mounted all the way in the back, so you're supposed to run this wiring all the way forward. Also too, here's another thing to keep in mind. The battery on the Challengers, Chargers, 300s, whatever, it is in the trunk of the vehicle. So if we wanted to run this directly to the battery, we would go backwards towards the back of the vehicle. My question is, do I want to run it that way, or do I want to keep things simple and run it forward up into the engine bay and to the power distribution box? I kind of think that's the direction I'm going to go with it, because I think it's going to be a lot easier to wire it that way. A lot cleaner. You won't have wires running all the way to the back underneath the vehicle that you have to zip tie every 3 inches. I just think it's going to be cleaner to go to the front of the vehicle with it. So that's what I'm going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get both cutouts plugged in. We're going to route this wiring as far forward as we can, make it to an accessible location, and then we'll go ahead and go from there. Now remember, when you are putting this wiring in, try to route it in such a way that it will not catch or drag on anything. Keep it away from any major heat sources like the exhaust manifolds themselves. Do your best to keep it away from all of those things. Like if it's resting against a transmission case or something like that, not really a huge deal. They don't get that hot, so don't worry about that. I'm talking specifically the exhaust components themselves. So keep them away from all those components and use zip ties to, actually the best solution is to use zip ties to wire them to an existing wiring harness, because those have been routed in such a way as to stay away from those heat sources. So if you can, zip tie them directly to an existing wire harness, and we'll get started on this. All right, I don't believe it matters which side goes to which, because it's all running off the same signal. Now these are a push lock style connection, so that means that after you fully connect the connector, there is an additional tab that needs to be clicked down into place to really lock it in. So these things are definitely not going anywhere. I had to use that phrase at some point during this, right? That's not going anywhere. All right, you definitely do not want that wire harness for these things to be anywhere near the openings of the cutouts themselves. They're going to be distributing hot exhaust, so get the wiring away from that as much as you can. And I think I'm going to route this right up here along the passenger side, because that is where the power distribution block is anyway. It's on the passenger side of this engine bay. So I'm going to use a series of zip ties to hold this wiring in place. And I think that's going to work out well. There we go, got the wiring all situated. You know, that kind of a goal of mine is to keep it nice and clean so it doesn't look really cluttered in the engine bay, but I'll go ahead and show you where the wiring is. So it's right back here. This wire here goes behind the purge solenoid, back up here, and then I connected it to the washer system, ran it down there. And then there's a bunch of extra wiring that you don't want to clip that. You want to just coil it. So I ran it down there so it's out of the way, zip tied in place, and then the wiring comes back up, goes over here to the ground there, and then the power right there to the distribution box. So again, I think it was a fairly clean install overall. You're not going to notice anything. I think the only thing there is to do now is pull the remote control out and test this thing. A couple more points I wanted to make about zip ties real quick. So I mentioned keep it away from any sort of a heat source, but also keep it away from anything that rotates or that moves. It sounds obvious, but I cannot tell you how many times I've raised a vehicle and literally seen that someone has zip tied their wiring harness, whatever aftermarket component they've ran, to like the actual shaft itself. I am not kidding. People do these things. So when you're running your wiring, keep it away from anything that rotates and anything that's hot. You do that, you be in good shape. The other thing I want to mention is that they generally with these kind of kits will give you quite a few zip ties. Use them. You don't want to have big saggy areas of the wiring where it's hanging down and it can catch on anything, or it can be chafed or pinched. So be liberal with your use of zip ties. Try to do as clean of a job as you can, or like I mentioned, tie it to existing wiring harnesses. That way it's much more of a clean install. Don't just run it randomly along the side of the vehicle. I think it looks absolutely terrible like that. Even if it's on the bottom of the car and the only people who are going to see it are you or maybe another technician who looks at it, try to do the best job you can. Make it really look professional when you're under there. Now, the last thing I want to mention is also when you are running your wiring like that, try to keep it neat under there and don't have big loops, but also don't have it too tight. You don't want to have it straining at the plugs because it's a potential to pull the wiring out of the plug itself. So give yourself a little bit of slack, like just enough, but also don't crank it too tight and not way too loose. So those are my thoughts on running some wiring along the vehicle. So I have to admit, this is pretty cool. So that wiring was ridiculously simple. I mean, just plug, 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 run the wiring up, connect it to the battery or the power distribution block in this case. Done. That's all you have to do. There's no other connections to make beyond power and ground. And then with the little remote here, you have to remove the back and take the battery out because there's a little battery isolator in there to keep the battery from going dead while it's in shipping. So you take that out, put the battery back in, then just hit the button. Man, that's cool. And as far as I know, there's an app you can just run through your phone to do it through your phone as well if you lose track of the remote or don't want to hold on to that, or you want to do it from outside the vehicle, whatever you want to do. So that's a pretty cool deal. This was really, really a simple install. I think the hardest part is figuring out exactly where to place it on the vehicle. That was, I mean, I'm pretty sure this is going to work out really well. We're going to do a sound test right now on there, but as far as the installation goes, beyond the welding part, which requires a little bit of technical skill, other than that, this was a very, very straightforward install, not difficult at all. I think it's going to sound amazing. Let's get this thing down. I can't wait to hear what this thing sounds like. man, I'm a fan. I gotta tell you, this thing sounds amazing. Hold on. So you've got your normal mode here. Sounds pretty good. You know, I actually like the sound of it just the way it was with the aftermarket exhaust. But then, all right, that sounds a lot more rowdy. And then, nice and quiet again. Man, I think this was a great choice to go with the cutouts. I'm really, really happy with them. There it is, one more project finished here at Reignited. I want to thank you guys so much for following along. As you can see, that system was very simple, very easy to install, and the user friendliness of it I really enjoy. That little remote that it comes with, or you can use a phone setup on there. There's no switches that you have to wire up through the vehicle or drill holes in your console or anything like that. I was a little bit worried about that. Seems like they've moved beyond that these days. Very simple, it's all just remote operated, so awesome, awesome system. Super happy with the results as well. That's pretty much exactly what I was expecting out of that system. The quality was pretty much on par with where I thought it was going to be with the price. Some things I wish would have been a little bit better, but honestly, not bad at all. And I do like the fact that the tubing comes pre-coped like that with the fish mount setup, so it's very easy just to clamp on there and do your weld and you're done. As you can see, just an afternoon's work basically, and it's all together. And it sounds fantastic. I'm really happy with that kit. I'll post a link to it down below. Again, I don't have any sort of sponsorship to it, so I won't get anything if you click on that link. I'm just telling you, this is the information, this is what I put on, that's how much it costs. Guys, you've seen my videos, you know I hate to do this, but this time I'm going to have to ask, if you enjoy what you've seen here, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and more importantly, if you could click the notification bell. It really seems like not many people are getting my videos recommended to them, so I think if you can click that bell, it's really gonna make a change for me, and I'll start getting a lot more viewership, which will allow me to keep doing these videos for you guys, because over this last almost year that I've been doing this, I really, really enjoyed the process. I really think it's a lot of fun doing these videos, and there's such great feedback with you guys. You have helped me just as much as I've helped you, and I want to continue that. So guys, thank you again for everything. We'll see you next time on Reignited.